The gentleman from Stanton, Mr. Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, House Bill 4 provides for a referendum at the November 8, 2016 election to approve or reject the Right to Work Amendment to the Constitution. Section 30-19.9 Code of Virginia requires the Department of Elections to run advertisements in state newspapers and prepare posters and pamphlets providing public notice about constitutional amendments. I move to engross the bill, pass it to its third reading.
Gentleman from Charlottesville, Mr. Toscano.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentleman yield for a question?
Gentleman yield.
Yes, I yield.
Gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd ask the gentleman, I'm trying to really understand the pressing need for this constitutional amendment. We've had right to work in the Virginia Code since 1947. And so I guess I would first ask the gentleman, is the concern that he has greater number of union members in Virginia? And if so, is he aware that since 1983, the number of members in union households has declined in the United States by over 3 million people, and in Virginia it only represents 5.4% of the workforce?
Mr. Speaker, I would say to the gentleman, I'm really not aware of a pressing need, and I'm really not concerned with the size of the union membership. What I'm concerned with is enshrining a piece of legislation that has worked very well in Virginia for almost 70 years, making it a permanent part of the Virginia Constitution so that we don't have to worry about a challenge.
Mr. Speaker, will the gentleman yield for a question?
Will the gentleman yield?
I yield.
Gentleman yields.
I'd ask the gentleman, in light of his worry about a challenge, can he point to any time that this right-to-work statute has been challenged in the sense that legislation has been offered to overturn it or repeal it?
Mr. Speaker, I would say to the gentleman that since it's Groundhog Day, that question is appropriate because it's been asked every year that I've carried this legislation, and it keeps coming back, and we keep answering the same question. So I'm not aware of a challenge, a serious challenge, and once again, that's not the point of this legislation. The right to work, just like the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, is fundamental, and it deserves constitutional protection.
Mr. Speaker, speak to the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, you know, maybe it is like Groundhog Day, but for the life of me, I can't understand the rationale for why this bill is here. You know, this is the Constitution we're messing with here. And yeah, we have a lot of statutes in the Virginia Code that are really good statutes and been there for a long, long time. But we're not asking to put those statutes in the Constitution. And in fact, there's really good reason for that. James Madison in Federalist 49 said we change constitutions for great and extraordinary occasions. And yet, the gentleman cannot point to us one pressing need that's out there. Now, a couple of years ago, we had this huge debate here on a constitutional amendment on eminent domain. That debate was a very legitimate debate because it arose out of a pressing concern, and that was that Kelo decision. And we passed that bill. It went to the voters. They passed the change. It was a pressing concern that we dealt with. But again and again, we hear no pressing concern. The number of labor union members has been declining nationwide. And in Virginia, it's only 5.4% of the population. Has there been any study that the gentleman can allude to that points out that there's some kind of wage inflation that's being brought on by too many labor members in the Commonwealth of Virginia? Or lower business profits? Has he cited any business who's rejected coming to Virginia because our labor policy is too liberal? Has he cited any strikes or any union activity that has affected the Commonwealth in any major way? Can he point to any fundamental challenges to right to work since 1947? 1947. You do the math. It's a long time. or any Virginia court case that is now pending that would challenge the right to work statute in Virginia. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no evidence of a pressing concern. There is no problem to solve except politically. And we don't change our Constitution willy-nilly in this Commonwealth. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you will say, hands off my Constitution and vote no on this bill.
Mr. Speaker, speaking to the bill. Mr. Speaker, I would say to the gentleman and anyone else who seems to share his ideas and points of view, there are two ways to look at this. If it is your preference to wait until there is a pressing need and to wait until an emergency exists, that's fine. On the other hand, if you choose to be proactive and have safeguards in place so that those needs never arise, then you would be standing with me on right to work. It should be noted that the right to work amendment, the right to work statute that we have now, does not prevent anyone from joining a union, should they choose. It allows unions in Virginia to bargain collectively. None of those things are changed by a constitutional amendment to the Constitution. The only thing that changes is that we have permanent protection for our workers. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from Manassas, Mr. Miller.
Mr. Speaker, speaking to the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, I heard from the other side a bunch of questions about if there were any statistics citing this or that or any legal cases facing the Commonwealth of Virginia and our right to work statutes. Mr. Speaker, I'd just like to double up on the gentleman from Stanton, Delegate Bell's comments. I'd say no, there are no legal cases pending right now. But I'll tell you, the immediate past Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Virginia was known widely for putting politics into an office that really shouldn't be involved in politics. And he was replaced by an Attorney General who's doing the same thing except on steroids. Mr. Speaker, we have the current Attorney General that, quite frankly, doesn't like to defend Virginia's law. In fact, Mr. Speaker, he did an amicus brief for the Fredericks versus California case, and when a group of teachers in California wanted to not be involved in their union, we have an Attorney General that sided with them. A California case.
Now he knows.
We've seen an Attorney General who doesn't care what our law says on marriage. We see an Attorney General currently who doesn't really, believe what our gun laws state. I could see our current Attorney General doing whatever he could and using any means possible to go after our right to work statutes, Mr. Speaker. So I would encourage this body to vote for this fantastic amendment that Delegate Bell's put before us today.